Good evening. I'd like to call the Tuesday, April 11th, 2023 Housing and Redevelopment meeting to order. The first item of order is the approval of the agenda. Are there any additions or changes to the agenda? Hearing none, we are looking for a motion to approve this evening's agenda.
Madam Chair, I move to approve the agenda.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. We have a motion by Commissioner Lewis and a second by Commissioner Carter. Are there any questions? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving tonight's agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the Tuesday, March 28th, 2023 meeting minutes. Are there any questions or changes to the meeting minutes? Hearing none, we are looking for a motion to approve Tuesday, March 28th, 2023 meeting minutes.
So moved.
Okay. We have a motion and a second.
Yes. Second.
Okay. We have a motion by Commissioner Doblinger and a second by Commissioner Lewis. Is there any discussion or comments? Hearing none, we will be looking for all those in favor of approving the March 20th, 2023 meeting minutes, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes 5-0 with 2 abstaining due to not being attending the meeting. Moving on, we are going to discussion items. Item number 4.1 is fair housing. Can we have the staff report, please?
Thank you, Chair Huhim. I have a presentation for you for fair housing this evening. So, today is the 55th anniversary of the passage of the Fair Housing Act, which is Title 8 of the Civil Rights Act of 1968. It literally was signed on April 11th, 1968. So in 1967, following the long, hot summer of 1967, which consisted of over 150 race-related riots, President Lyndon B. Johnson established the National Advisory Commission on Civil Disorders, also known as the Kerner Commission. The commission was tasked with investigating the causes of the riots that occurred in cities like Los Angeles, Detroit, Chicago, Newark, Milwaukee, and New York City. The final report of the commission, issued in 1968, pointed to a lack of economic opportunity, failed government programs, police brutality, and racism, among other causes. The commission's report is famously known for its declaration that our nation is moving toward 2 societies, one black, one white, separate and unequal. In 1968, when Congress enacted the Fair Housing Act, one of the act's co-sponsors, Senator Walter F. Mondale, explained that the purpose that the proposed law was designed to replace the ghettos by truly integrated and balanced living patterns. Congress intended that HUD do more than not simply discriminate itself and intended for HUD to use its grant programs to assist in ending discrimination and segregation, to the point where the supply of genuinely open housing increases. As such, since 1968, the federal government recognized its role in creating segregated living patterns that continue to have negative impacts on health, education, and the economy, and its responsibility to undo the effects of policies, practices, and procedures that result in a lack of equity. For much of the late 19th and early 20th century, government at all levels throughout the United States, along with private developers and mortgage lending institutions, played an active role in creating segregated living patterns and inequalities of opportunity. The federal government used the power of the military to remove Native Americans from their homelands, restricted federally insured mortgages on the basis of race, and used slum clearance and urban renewal programs to demolish neighborhoods for infrastructure projects that largely benefited white Americans at a significant cost to, and perpetuated the segregation of Black communities, indigenous communities, and other communities of color. Private housing developers are also use racially restricted covenants that we know about that perpetuated segregation and restricted access to home ownership and other housing opportunities for communities of color, among many other forms of discrimination. Therefore, the protected classes in the Fair Housing Act of the Civil Rights Act is race, color, creed, religion, national origin, sex, marital status, disability, status as relates to public assistance, sexual orientation, and familial status. Because of this being the 55th anniversary, there are national events that are planned that are televised. So today there was an opening ceremony by HUD that anybody could have attended virtually. And there are some other virtual events. And so there's the webpage on this slide for that. So affirmatively furthering fair housing. The obligation of affirmatively furthering fair housing requires recipients of HUD funds to take meaningful actions in addition to combating discrimination that overcome patterns of segregation and foster inclusive communities free from barriers that restrict access to opportunity based on protected characteristics. Federal financial assistance recipients, such as us, the city and the HRA do receive federal funds. CDBG, Section 8, or Housing Choice Voucher Program are just two of those. We are required to determine who lacks access to opportunity and address inequity among protected class groups, promote integration and reduce segregation, and transform racially or ethically concentrated areas of poverty into areas of opportunity. We also do affirm that we're furthering fair housing through annual certifications that are signed with our federal programs. And so when Housing Choice Voucher comes before you, there is a certification in there for fair housing that is signed by myself and the chair. And then CDBG, that is signed by the mayor. And then this picture on the left is actually from HUD. This is a part of their campaign, that fair housing is more than just words. And the symbols you see there are the symbol for the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, the Equal Housing Opportunity, and then they have a ribbon, which is Fair Housing Awareness, which is what that ribbon stands for. So I thought it would be interesting and helpful to provide you with the Minnesota cases by basis. These are cases that have been filed with either HUD in their Fair Housing Equal Opportunity Office or FHAP. FHAP stands for Fair Housing Assistance Program Agency. In Minnesota, there is only one, and that is the City of St. Paul Department of Human Rights and Equal Economic Opportunity Commission. So those complaints are for St. Paul in that column. So in fiscal year 2022, you can see broken out by basis the cases that were filed, and that total for the year was 33, with disability leading as the highest number, and then race a second behind that. However, for the quarter one of fiscal year 23, we have already seen 20 complaints to HUD and or FHAP for fair housing. And so this information was presented by the Midwest Hub Chicago Program Center Office of HUD under their Program and Compliance branch on April 3rd, 20 of this year, that they provided us this information. So we have the Fair Housing Implementation Council. And so this is the Ad Hoc Fair Housing Implementation Council, or better known as the FIC, was established in 2002 to coordinate efforts of its participating members to comply with their obligations to affirmatively further fair housing throughout the Twin Cities metro housing market area. Funding members administer Federal Community Development Block Grant, or CDBG, and Home Investment Partnership Program, or better known as HOME funding. So the City of Bloomington, we are a CDBG entitlement city. And for home funding, we are a part of the consortium with Hennepin County, Eden Prairie, and Plymouth. And so our home dollars go into that consortium, and then Hennepin County leads the process for doing a request for proposals to spend those dollars on home eligible activities. The program participants also have other fair housing programs in which they administer, and it's certified to HUD that they will affirmatively further fair housing through the operation of their housing and community development programs to overcome fair housing impediments. The FIC also has representation by a number of area-wide agencies, as you can see on your screen, and organizations interested in affirmatively furthering fair housing. One of the things that, in addition to everything that the FIC does, they also have provided regional analysis reports and or support. And so they did do an analysis to impediments to fair housing choice. It's also just called AI. They did an assessment of fair housing for the region, and then they support with our consolidated plan. So we have 5-year consolidated plans for the Housing Choice Voucher Program, and we have 5-year consolidated plans for the CDBG program. And so we are currently in our 5-year plan, which is 2020 through 2024. So next year we will start working on our next 5-year plan with input and information with the FIC, but also with Hennepin County, Eden Prairie, and Plymouth. And then our annual action plans. And this is what you saw in recommended approval of our CDBG annual action plan and budget, which is going before the City Council on April 17th for a public hearing. So that is also how the FIC participates with us. And they have identified 8 goal areas. And so on January 21st of 2021, the FIC released the Twin Cities Regional Analysis of Impediments to Fair Housing Choice, which is a thorough examination of structural barriers to fair housing choice and access to opportunity for members of historically marginalized groups protected from discrimination by the Federal Fair Housing Act. The report can be reviewed online, which is also in the staff report. The link is in the staff report. And then there are 8 goal areas that were identified as a focus through fair housing activities by the FIC and its participating members. And as you can see, when you see these 8 goal areas, you can also think of how the work that we're already doing does align with this. So it's not that we're out of alignment by any means. It helps inform how we do our work right here in Bloomington. So on November of 2022, the FIC did approve funding for 3 fair housing activities through the CDBG, through use of CDBG funds. And as you recall, the CDBG entitlement funds that we get in the city of Bloomington, we do have a portion that goes to the Fair Housing Implementation Council. And so when you take the funds from all of the different communities that are a part of the regional body, it's how we got to be able to have this investment amount. And so the key proposal elements that they were looking for were organizational capacity, qualification and experience, work plan and budget, and racial equity. And so 3 recipients were awarded Affordable Housing Connections for fair housing trainings for landlords and tenants, Homeline for eviction prevention project, and Minnesota Homeownership Center for culturally relevant home stretch curriculum, which is Minnesota Homeownership Center has revamped their home stretch curriculum to include this, and they have also digitized it. And so when it says culturally relevant, one of the things that they have added is the history of Minnesota, and how we had racially restricted covenants and what the impacts are. So that has been added, and that curriculum actually was used this past Saturday here in Bloomington, as we were one of the first communities where that home stretch curriculum was being taught. And so Bloomington, we have a fair housing policy. Our fair housing policy was adopted by the City Council on August 6th of 2018. And then the HRA did adopt it December 14th of 2021. And that was a formal action. When the City Council adopted it, the HRA was very much so involved in it. However, as just a separate legal entity, we weren't called out in the fair housing policy. And so it was under the legal advice to just formally adopt the policy, since we weren't necessarily called out. In that policy, it does identify internal practices that we will do: training, housing analysis, code analysis, project planning and analysis, community engagement, and affirmatively furthering fair housing, as well as external practices of intake and referral, meaningful access, so online information and in-person information, as well as different languages. And so I wanted to show, how does all this come together to what we're doing right now? Well, with those 8 goal areas and with the fair housing policy as identified, our state of homelessness assessment that will be completed this month, homebuyer mortgage assistance for access for home buyers, foreclosure prevention, counseling and assistance, homeownership pathways education, like I mentioned, home stretch, but also journey to homeownership. Our home improvement loan programs, where we have loan programs that are emergency, loan programs that are forgivable, and loan programs that are deferred over 30 years. Affordable homeownership development. This is our single-family affordable homeownership development that we're looking at doing and working with Habitat for Humanity and West Hennepin Affordable Housing Land Trust, again, through CDBG. Our home improvement loan programs, affordable homeownership development are all through CDBG, home buyer mortgage assistance, state of homelessness assessment, foreclosure prevention counseling assistance is all through American Rescue Plan Act dollars that the City Council did approve. And then Affordable Rental Programs Administration. So this is our properties that we own and rent out, our home buyer program properties, as well as our housing choice voucher program. And then the Opportunity Housing Ordinance, where it's access to affordable rental property and it's not concentrating affordable, because we do have a requirement for dispersion in that ordinance. Missing middle and our cluster housing. This is on our work plan, but planning is leading it. And so the studies under this and the code amendment recommendations all align with our fair housing policy and the greater analysis of impediments to fair housing that was completed regionally. And so this poster that you see on the side is that HUD has a campaign. So these are HUD's posters, but one of their campaigns is Choices for All Voices, Building an Equitable Future. And then lastly, just some fair housing resources. I included them in the packet, but I also just wanted to have them here if anyone suspects unfair housing practices. And this is in homeownership or rental. Fair housing covers it all. They can reach out to HUD, Minnesota Department of Human Rights, and our Bloomington Human Rights Commission does have resources and referrals on our Bloomington webpage. And so that's what I have about fair housing, and I'm open for any questions or comments that anybody may have.
Thank you very much, Administrator Coleman. This is a discussion item, so are there any questions or comments? Yes, Commissioner Martin.
Just out of curiosity off the top of the head, so the dramatic increase we've seen on claims for discriminatory housing practices, do we have an idea with the expiration of eviction moratoriums if now people are being put in this situation again, or is this atypical for history in general to see this big of a?
Thank you, Chair Huheem and Commissioner Martin. Thank you for the question. That question actually was raised when HUD presented the information, and we do believe that with the eviction moratorium and the increase in rental rates, that more people are at risk of losing their housing and are having there's been a better understanding of how to report the information when you are suspected that something may be wrong. And so there's more advocacy happening. And so it's just all the things at one time. But we do believe, when I say we, it was housing professionals in the room that were getting that presentation. We do believe that it definitely ties in with the eviction moratorium, but also it ties in with, there's an interagency task force called PAVE. This is an interagency task force with HUD, and the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau and a lot of other acronyms that they have, and it's 13 agencies at the federal level that are looking into property valuations, because there has been an increase in awareness of appraisals being discriminatory. And so that interagency task force is doing a review and making recommendations on how to look at that and regulate that. So those complaints were not just rental housing. Those complaints were all housing, but it's all the things at one time.
Are there any other questions or comments? I actually have one, Administrator Coleman. When looking at, what's been brought, and I'm going to be very honest, I haven't kept up with a lot of the city council meetings as of late, but I do know, code was brought up And I'm wondering, in that presentation, when we were talking about lot sizes and rezoning, was, the Fair Housing Act brought into that and into that discussion to make people aware that we are really following what our policy of what the city of Bloomington put into place?
Thank you, Chair Huhim. I did follow the presentation. I do not think fair housing itself was brought up at all or brought into the discussion.
Thank you. I just think it might be something to definitely notify council maybe about as commissioners if you feel the need to, or at the next presentation that they do have, if they have like an open comment period, it's definitely something I feel that I would address to them, as I feel it does go by what we all said that we were going, well, I know as a commissioner I had signed the thing and approved it, so I should be very active in that. So just something I had taken notice of that I thought was very important, and how it's aligning with that. And then the only other thing I had is kind of the community engagement. What kind of outreach do we have regarding the Fair Housing Act to our community?
Absolutely. Thank you, Chair Huhim. So the city has put out an ad in the Sun Current that is running through the month around fair housing and how to report, how to file complaints. So that information is running in the Sun Current. And then in the Journey to Homeownership and the engagement that all the HRA staff have, the fair housing information is being provided as well as discussed in every last interaction around the different programs that we have. However, fair housing is not just the HRA. And so I do know that the other staff of the city that are working with people that in housing situations, such as maybe our inspectors or different people, are providing different information around how to file complaints or address complaints. And we have our partner organizations. And so Homeline is a partner organization that is working on tenant advocacy as well as renter health with public health. And so there's information coming from Homeline. Housing Link is a supported nonprofit by the HRA, and they also have quite a bit of information on their webpage that they also release publications, and they do provide training as well for property managers and owners around proper fair housing. And then they have videos for on their webpage about maybe examples, because sometimes people don't know. They might feel uneasy, but they don't know, like, was that discriminatory? And so there's just some help and communication in that as well, just to name a few.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. I will say that I also checked on the website, and there was a lot of information on our website as well under the HRA, so it's very helpful. Are there any other questions or discussion on this item? If not, then we will be moving on to item 4.2, which is upcoming events. Can we have the staff report, please?
Absolutely. Thank you, Chair Huhim. And so I just wanted to briefly touch on the upcoming events. So our monthly Journey to Homeownership courses are happening at Center for the Arts. And so people can visit our city webpage at blm.mn/events. And each one of those are there. So Tuesday, April 18th, it'll be in Somali. Wednesday, April 19th, it'll be in English, and Thursday, April 20th, it'll be in Spanish. Again, these are monthly, and so they'll come right back in May. But these are the ones that are coming up next week. We do encourage people to register just so we have a head count. Then we have the Twin Cities Diversity Homeownership Fair. This is on Saturday, May 20th, which is going to be a very busy day because I would be remiss to not mention that it's our Public Works open house and the anniversary and open house for our police department, all on May 20th. However, the HRA will be tabling at the home fair, the Twin Cities Diversity Homeownership Fair, on Saturday, May 20th from 9 to 3 p.m. And this actually will be in Brooklyn Center at New Millennium Academy. And this is a collaborative effort by real estate professional affinity groups representing the LGBTQIA community, Hispanic, Asian Pacific Islander, Black African American, and I think it's those four. I always forget. I have the acronyms in my head. So this is a collaborative event that they are putting on. This is the second year that they've done it. So last year, this did happen, and I attended. But this year, we are tabling. as the HRA, and so you will see more announcements and advertisement about that, so I wanted you to know it first. In the online packet, there is a flyer, and it has a link in it to Eventbrite for people to click on that so they can register for that event as well. It's a free event for them to attend. And then I just wanted to briefly touch on past events. So we did have a Renters Resource Fair and Eviction Prevention Clinic on March 18th. We will have another one coming up in June of this year. It was very successful, so we will be doing more advertisement and information about that and resources around that. Homestretch, like I mentioned, was just held April 8th. This was the first one of the year. This is the 8-hour HUD certified course that provides a lot of education around the home buying process, but is also geared towards first-time and or first-generation home buyers, because that certificate can be used to help qualify for down payment assistance. And that we will have another one of those coming up in June. However, this is with our partnership with Project for Pride in Living, PPL, and they did say, hey, if you want to have more, we can have more. And I was like, wow, okay. And then those are the events coming up so far. We have more events throughout the year, but I just wanted to give you these right here. And we will be doing more advertisements and information in the briefing as well around what's coming up.
Thank you, Administrator Coleman. Are there any questions, comments? Yes, Commissioner Carter.
Thank you. I just have a quick question. Do we ever promote these events through the school district?
Thank you, Chair Huhim and Commissioner Carter. Yes,
Okay, good.
we do.
Awesome. Thank you.
Commissioner Mueller.
Yes. Who is staffing the table at like the diversity homeownership fair?
Thank you, Chair Huhim, Commissioner Mueller. I will be there, and then it's open to staff for at least one other staff member, but it's open to commissioners if you would like to also join and participate in that.
I wish I could. I have a few other things scheduled that day. What is the attendance, or what was the attendance like at the Renters Resource Fair and the home stretch?
Absolutely. Great question. So for the renters, the Eviction Prevention Clinic and Renters Resource Fair, we had 15 households. We had 15 households represented and attend, and we did have some people show up that were from community that wanted to gather information to take back to others, or to reach people that they knew couldn't make it that day. And so that was really exciting. And what that Eviction Prevention Clinic was there were organizations, Hennepin County Emergency Assistance, Human Services, Legal Aid, Bloomington Public Schools, Bloomington Public Health. There were a few other organizations, but they did a brief intake, met with a navigator about their specific situation in a confidential manner, and then they were taken directly to the different booths to get the help that they needed. And so that was really powerful, where people were coming in, not just walking away with flyers, but they were getting help that day. And so that's why that's really great. And then for the home stretch workshop, it was 22 participants that showed up on Saturday. So, yeah.
Wonderful. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, we will then move on to item 4.3, which is Commissioner questions and comments. Are there any questions, comments of anything not on the agenda tonight? Hearing none, we will move on to adjournment, item 5. So we will be looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do we have a motion? Do we have a second? Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Martin and a second by Commissioner Mueller to adjourn the Tuesday, April 11th, 2023 Housing and Redevelopment Authority meeting. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0.